Hey First Family, it's Miss Murphy here to read you a story today. We are going to be reading a story called Two Bad Ants, and this story is by Chris Van Allsburg. So we can start thinking, what is this story going to be about? I see two ants, and in the title, Two Bad Ants. I wonder if they're going to be bad. What are they going to do? Let's start reading and see. The news traveled swiftly through the tunnels of the ant world. A scout had returned with a remarkable discovery, a beautiful, sparkling crystal. So I can already start thinking while I'm reading, what is a scout? I think the scout probably is the leader of the ants. And what is this beautiful, sparkling crystal? Where did he find it? When the scout presented the crystal to the ant queen, she took a small bite and then quickly ate the entire thing. So if she's eating the entire thing quickly, do we think it was probably a good thing? The crystal was delicious? She deemed it the most delicious food she had ever tasted. Nothing could make her happier than to have more and more and more. And the ants understood. They were eager to gather more crystals because the queen was the mother of them all. Her happiness made the whole ant nest a happy place. So we see this crystal and we see the queen eating it. We know that if something makes someone happy, we want to do more of it. So that's what these ants are set off to do. It was late in the day when they departed. Long shadows stretched over the entrance to the ant kingdom, and one by one, the ants climbed out, following the scout, who is the leader, who made it clear that there were many, many more crystals where the first one had been found, but the journey was long and it was dangerous. They marched into the woods that surrounded their underground home. Dusk turned to night, and the path they followed twisted and turned, every bend leading them darker into the forest. So there they go, following one after the other. Think about how small this ant is and how big everything must seem around them. More than once, the line of ants stopped and anxiously listened for the sounds of hungry spiders, but all they heard was a call of crickets echoing through the woods in the distance like thunder. Dew formed on the leaves above, and without warning, huge cold drops fell on the marching ants. A firefly passed overhead that, for an instant, lit up the woods with a flash of light. Are they going to make it? Where are they going? At the edge of the forest stood a mountain, and the ants looked up and could not see the top. It seemed to reach right into the heavens, but they did not stop. Up the side they climbed, higher and higher and higher. The wind whistled through the cracks at the mountain's face, and the ants could feel its force, bending their delicate antennas. Their legs grew weak as they struggled upward. At last they reached a ledge and crawled through a narrow tunnel. So I think making the queen happy is motivating them. Does this look familiar? Where do you think the ants are going? Is this a mountain they're climbing? I don't think so. Looks like a house to me. When the ants came out of the tunnel, they found themselves in a strange world. Smells they had known all their lives, smells of dirt and grass and plants, had gone away. There was no more wind, and the most puzzling of all, it seemed that the sky was gone. They crossed smooth, shiny surfaces. They followed the scout up a glassy, curved wall. They had reached their goal. From the top of the wall, they looked below to the sea of crystals. One by one, the ants climbed down into the sparkling treasure. So there we see them on the ledge. Why had the sky gone away? Why do you think they said that? Quickly, they each chose a crystal. They turned to start the journey home. There was something about this unnatural place that made the ants nervous. In fact, they felt in such a hurry that none of them even noticed the two small ants who stayed behind. Why go back? One said to the other. This place may not feel like home, but look at all these crystals. You're right, said the other. We can stay here and eat this tasty treasure every day forever. So the two ants ate crystal after crystal until they were too full to move and fell asleep. Look at this picture. What do you think they're calling crystals? I see some letters here labeling a jar that they're inside. I think it might be sugar. This is probably why the queen ant thought it was so delicious. Daylight came and the sleeping ants were unaware of changes taking place in their newfound home. A giant silver scooper hovered above them, and it plunged deep into the crystals, and it shoveled them both up and carried them high in the air. The ants were wide awake when the scoop turned, dropping them from a frightening height. They tumbled through space in a shower of crystals and fell into a boiling brown lake. So someone's probably using the sugar. What are they putting it into? Oh no. Then the giant scoop stirred violently back and forth. Crushing waves fell over the ants and they paddled hard to keep their tiny heads above the water, but the scoop kept spinning the hot brown liquid. Around and around it went, creating a whirlpool that sucked the ants deeper and deeper. They both held their breath and finally bobbed to the surface, gasping for air and spitting mouthfuls of the terrible, bitter water. So we see they're probably in a cup of coffee that somebody is stirring around with a spoon. Are they going to make it? Then the lake tilted and began to empty into a cave. The ants could hear the rushing water and felt themselves pulled toward the pitch black hole. Suddenly, the cave disappeared and the lake became calm again. The ants swam to the shore and found that the lake had steep sides. They hurried down the walls that held back the lake. The frightening insects looked for a place to hide, worried the giant scoop might shovel them up again. Close by, they found a huge round disc with holes that could neatly hide them. So what are they talking about when they say a huge cave was about to come into view? Does it look like a mouth? And here's the little ants. To us, a cup looks really small. To these ants, it's a whole world. But as soon as they climbed inside, their hiding place was lifted, tilted, and lowered into a dark space. When the ants climbed out of the holes, they were surrounded by a strange red glow. It seemed to them that every second the temperature was rising. It soon became so unbearably hot that they thought they would soon be cooked. But suddenly, the disc they were standing on rocketed upward, and the two ants went flying into the air. Quick, take a guess. What do you think their hiding space is with all those clues? Did you guess a toaster? That's not a very safe hiding place for them. They landed near what seemed to be a fountain, a waterfall pouring from a silver tube, and both ants had a powerful thirst and longed to dip their feverish heads into the refreshing water. They quickly climbed along the tube. As they got closer to the rushing water, the ants felt a cool spray. They tightly gripped the shiny surface of the fountain and slowly leaned their heads into the falling stream, but the force of the water was much too strong. So we know that this isn't a fountain, it's a sink. The tiny insects were pulled off of the fountain and plunged down into a wet, dark chamber. They landed on half-eaten fruit and other soggy things. Suddenly, the air was filled with loud, frightening sounds, and the chamber began to spin. My gosh, the ants are probably really scared. The ants were caught in a whirling storm of shredded food and stinging rain. Then, just as quickly as it had started, the noise and spinning stopped. Bruised and dizzy, the ants climbed out of the chamber. So this is just the inside of the sink, but that could really hurt them. In daylight, once again, they raced through the puddles and up to the smooth metal wall. In the distance, they saw something comforting. 2 long, narrow holes that reminded them of the warmth and safety of their old home. They climbed up into the dark openings. So I think this is what they're talking about. Do we know that that's not very safe for them to hide? But they don't know. We'll see. There was no safety inside of these holes. A strange force passed through the ants. They were stunned, senseless, and blown out of the holes. When they landed, the tiny insects were too exhausted to go on. They crawled into a dark corner and fell fast asleep. So they were shot out of the plug, probably by electricity. Night had returned when the battered ants woke to a familiar sound, the footsteps of their fellow insects returning for more crystals. The 2 ants slipped quietly to the back of the line. They climbed the glassy wall and once again stood amid the treasure, but this time they each just chose a single crystal and followed their friends home. Standing at the edge of their ant hole, the 2 ants listened to the joyful sounds that came from below. They knew how grateful their mother queen would be when they gave her their crystals, and at that moment, the 2 ants felt happier than they'd ever felt before. This was their home, this was their family, and this is where they were meant to be. So they learned from their mistakes and went back home. And that is the end of the story. I hope you liked that one. After listening to the story, go to Seesaw and there's pictures on there. And as we talked about, the ants' perspective is a lot smaller than ours. Everything seems so big to the ants, and they don't even know what it is because they've lived in such a different world underground. So on Seesaw, look through the pictures, talk about what's happening in the picture, and talk about how it makes you feel, how it might make the ants feel. Good luck, record your answers, and I can't wait to hear them.